In a small coastal village where the waves kissed the shore and the wind howled through the cliffs, there stood a lighthouse, tall and steadfast. The village depended on it. Night and day, it guided ships safely into the harbor, preventing countless disasters over the years. But unlike the bustling village, the lighthouse was rarely noticed. People rarely thought of the keeper, an old man named Thomas, who lived alone at the base of the towering structure. For as long as the villagers could remember, Thomas had been there, maintaining the lighthouse, ensuring its light never went out. Every evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Thomas would climb the winding stairs to the lantern room and light the beacon. In the mornings, he'd sweep the floors and make repairs when the fierce winds cracked the walls or chipped the windows. The villagers never paid him much attention, assuming he was just a lonely man doing a job like any other. But despite the quiet routine, Thomas had long ago stopped being seen. The village's people were preoccupied with their own lives, farming, trading, and making their way in the world. There was a new generation now, and they had no memories of the time when the lighthouse keeper was a figure of admiration. Instead, they saw him as a relic, someone stuck in the past, irrelevant to their modern world. One particularly stormy night, a great disaster was about to unfold. A massive storm had rolled in from the sea, and the wind howled so fiercely that the trees bent under its pressure. The waves rose higher and higher, crashing against the rocky coastline like an unstoppable force. On that night, a ship had strayed too far off course, unable to see the lighthouse through the thick fog. The captain, desperate, had made a miscalculation, and before long the ship was off track and heading straight toward the jagged rocks. From his tower, Thomas noticed the dark shape of the ship, struggling to stay afloat, and he knew something was wrong. He immediately began to adjust the lighthouse's signal, shining it brighter and flashing it in warning. But as the storm raged on, Thomas realized the ship wasn't responding. It was clear that the captain had lost all sense of direction in the blinding storm. He was running out of time. Without hesitation, Thomas grabbed his coat and made his way down the narrow, winding stairs of the lighthouse, heading toward the cliffs. The storm raged on, but he knew what needed to be done. He had made this trip countless times before in less severe weather, but this time it was different. The wind nearly knocked him off his feet, and the rain battered his face like needles. The village had grown so used to the light of the lighthouse that they hadn't seen the man behind it. But tonight, he had to do more than just light the beacon. He had to save the ship. Thomas reached the cliffside where a rope ladder hung from the rocks, swaying in the gale. He knew the danger. He'd made the descent before, but only in the calm of daylight. Tonight, though, the sea was angry, and every wave that crashed against the rocks threatened to send him plummeting into the abyss. But he did not hesitate. With steady hands and unwavering resolve, Thomas climbed down the ladder, feeling the ocean spray sting his face. His heart raced, but his mind was calm, focused. The ship was getting closer, and he could hear the muffled sounds of the crew trying to get the sails under control. Just as he reached the base of the cliffs, the ship broke through the fog, its massive hull cutting through the waves. Thomas made his way toward the shoreline, shouting through the storm, trying to alert the captain. With all his might, he waved a flare into the night sky, the bright burst of red light cutting through the dark and fog. He repeated it again, and then again, his arm aching, but he refused to stop. Finally, through the haze of rain and wind, the ship's captain spotted the flare and adjusted his course. The ship slowly veered away from the rocks, and the crew managed to steer it to safety. By the time the ship passed, Thomas collapsed on the wet shore, utterly exhausted, his body battered by the storm's ferocity. He knew, however, that he had done his duty. He had saved the lives of those on board. But even as he sat there, breathing heavily, he heard nothing but the storm's fury. The villagers would never know the full extent of his sacrifice. The next morning, the sun came up, shining brightly over the village as if nothing had happened. The ship that had nearly been lost in the storm had safely docked, and the villagers went about their day, completely unaware of what had transpired the night before. The lighthouse light had saved them again, but this time they did not think to wonder who had tended it, who had made the sacrifice. Thomas, as he always did, climbed to the top of the lighthouse the next evening to light the beacon once more. He knew his work was quiet, unseen by many, but he had a larger vision than anyone realized. The value of his labor wasn't in recognition or praise, but in the lives he had protected and the constant vigilance he had maintained over the years. He didn't need the villagers to notice him. He understood that the quiet path, one of hard work, dedication, and selfless service, was the true path of wisdom. And so the lighthouse continued to shine, its keeper's role as indispensable as ever, but still largely unrecognized.